I thought it might be helpful to some of the beginners out there if I went across some of the basics of stick control. So we're going to look at this in three short videos. This first one about the grip, and then the second about bounce, and the third about accent. So, the grip. Oh dear. How many times do people want to stand up and have bare knuckle fights about my grip is better than your grip? Absolutely silly. There are a number of recognised grips, and we'll look at most of them today, and they're all good. They're all good. They all have their strengths and their weaknesses. So you need to investigate them and see what works best for you. That's really the grip you should be using, the one that works best for you. Let me show you some of the differences. Talking about the match grips first, the match grips where you have the same grip in each hand. There's kind of three variations on the match grip. There's the German timpani, where the hand is quite flat, somewhat like a basketballer's hand might be if they were dribbling a basketball up the court. That loose, fluid action through the wrist into the downstroke. Very similar, very, very similar indeed. Okay, when you get your hand flat, you're in German timpani. When you bring your hand more to a handshake position, that in match grip gives you French timpani. Your thumbs are on top. Yeah, the sticks are not quite parallel, but more that way. As I said, watch what happens when I just roll back out into German timpani. See the difference? Okay, German timpani, palms towards the camera, or palms towards the drum, yeah? And French timpani, knuckles towards the camera, or knuckles towards the drums. Now there's a significant difference in how these grips work. The German timpani grip is called the wrist player's grip because it's most natural for your wrist to work in that motion. In the French timpani grip, the wrist action is not magnified like that. In fact, there's a tendency to not move the wrist much at all. And there's a good reason for that. If you look at the physiology, you have these tendons that run through what's called the carpal tunnel here in your wrist. And they're a bit like, if you like, pulleys and wires that are attached to your fingers here. So when you do them in this direction, then the wires and the pulleys, they all work in the right direction. Yeah? They're all designed to work really well in that direction. But if you turn them over like that, remember we were just doing that a second ago, and now you start doing this, ouch, and this, oh my dear, oh, and this, ouch, and this, oh, I've got to stop doing this immediately. Because what I'm doing here is I'm compressing this side and stretching this side with the tendons, and then immediately reversing that. I'm giving these tendons a hell of a time in here if I'm actually doing that sort of motion. So if you use French timpani incorrectly with this wrist motion, you stand a good chance of hurting yourself. You can get carpal tunnel syndrome. Your wrist can get so sore there'll be no more drumming. So be serious about this. If you're going to use the French timpani grip, it's about fingers. Fingers, the ball of the thumb, the stick moving around like that, very little wrist at all. You can use a little bit of wrist, of course, but just don't overuse the wrist. Don't sit on your hi-hat going toot, toot, bat, toot, 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 bat, toot, or you're going to get a sore wrist. Okay? If you want to use your wrist like that, roll it over into the German timpani position. The handshake goes out the window and you're back in the basketball court, right? In the basketball court, you can use your wrist like that all day. You're not going to get in any trouble at all because of the direction of the wires and the pulleys, so to speak. Okay? So anyway, just clearing that up. From a musical perspective, it really is about whether you want to be on top of the sticks or underneath them. So that's got a lot to do with whether you're playing with a lot of power or a lot of finesse. So you'll find jazz drummers, for example, tend to use the French timpani, and rock drummers, tend to use the German timpani for these obvious reasons. But it's not like you can't play powerful with French timpani, and it's not like you can't play delicately with German timpani. I mean, it's about how you work the grips. I use both. I tend to use German timpani most of the time, and I use French timpani when I want to get underneath the sticks. But because as a child I was taught in the traditional grip, which is also another way of getting underneath the stick, yeah. When I do this, when I want to play with very delicately, I tend to not use French. I tend to use traditional in my left hand, but only because I was taught that way as a child. And frankly, my traditional grip is in a lot better shape than my left hand French timpani, yeah, because I'm normally using German in that hand. So it's also kind of what you get used to, you know. But don't sweat the small stuff. Whichever grip you're using, there are mechanics at play. What we want to do with this stick is we want to give it a point for which it can pivot. This point here is known as the fulcrum of the grip. And we don't want to put the fulcrum right on the point of balance of the stick, because if we do that, then the stick is actually kind of dead. It's kind of inert in your hand. It won't do anything, yeah. And obviously, if we held in front of that point of balance, the pivot would then allow the back of the stick to fall down, which is somewhat counterproductive. So if we come back the other side of that point of balance, just a centimetre or so, we're going to make the stick tip heavy. So it's going to fall forward like that in our hand without us doing anything. See that natural action there with the fulcrum? So whether you're using the German timpani fulcrum like I am there, yeah, or whether you're using the French timpani fulcrum, or even if you're using the traditional fulcrum, it's all about the stick being in balance so it can fall on the drum and do that. Bounce. And that, of course, is the subject of the next film. See you there.